there, it's Leslie here. One of the most serious problems that I want to talk with you about that you need to conquer is we need to conquer failure, because we're going to fail. And a lot of you are trying some brand new things, like maybe getting out of that destructive triangle that we talked about last time. And maybe you tried a couple new steps and they didn't go so well and you failed, and you might have told yourself, this isn't working. I can't do this. Yes, you can, if you can begin to conquer your mindset about failure. My little granddaughter Natalia began to walk a couple years ago, and when she began to walk, she stumbled around, she fell down many times, probably at least 500 to 1,000 times did she fall down before she got it right. But little Natalia never told herself she couldn't do it. She never said, this means I can't walk, this means I'm a failure. She just knew intuitively that if she were going to learn to walk, she would have to learn by falling down a number of times. You see, failure is part of the growth and learning process. But if we don't look at it that way, we will be intimidated by failure and we will make it about us instead of something that happened to us. And so the first key point that I want you to know is, if you want to grow, if you want to learn, if you want to expand and get healthier, failure is going to be a part of that. And you're just going to have to get used to it, because you cannot grow and you cannot learn and you cannot change without experiencing some failure. So understand that it's an important part of your growth, and so don't let it stop you dead in your tracks. Key point number 2 is that everybody fails. No matter how smart, how talented, how godly, how healthy, or how strong you are, you will fail at something, especially when you start to try new things. Let me give you a couple of examples of people who are really famous who failed. Walt Disney. He was fired as an editor in a newspaper because he lacked creative ideas. He also went bankrupt a couple times before he created Disneyland. Another person, Thomas Edison, perhaps you've heard of him. Yes, he invented the light bulb. He is an inventor, and yet his teacher in elementary school told him he was stupid. I'm so glad he didn't believe her. And then we think of a famous athlete. Maybe you don't remember him, Babe Ruth. He was a baseball player, but he's considered one of the greatest athletes that ever lived. He had the highest home run record, but he also had the highest strikeout record. So in the midst of him being a great baseball player, he still failed to hit the ball a number of times. But he didn't see himself as a failure, even though he failed. And Winston Churchill didn't become Prime Minister of England until he was 62. And that was only after repeated setbacks. And yet he became a great leader during World War II and did most of his best work as a senior citizen. I think of a character in the Bible, Elijah, who got very discouraged because the thing that he thought was going to happen didn't happen. And so he felt like a failure. After Mount Carmel experience in 1 Kings 19, when he began to call down the fire from heaven on that wet altar and to try to prove to the prophets of Baal that the God of Israel was stronger, and he wanted to prove to King Ahab and Queen Jezebel that they should bow down and worship the King of Israel. And God did come through, and the miracle happened, and the fire licked up the sacrifice. But in the end, Ahab and Jezebel didn't change. They didn't repent. In fact, they wanted to kill Elijah. And he went running off, and he said in 1 Kings 19, he said, I have had enough, Lord. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors who've already died. Everything I've done is a waste. You see, sometimes we feel like it's a failure when it really isn't. And yet, even Jesus, who is perfect, if we look at it from a purely secular perspective, failed to win the Pharisees' hearts, to win their allegiance, to convince them that he was indeed their Jewish Messiah. Instead, they wanted to have him killed. So no matter how much you try to do something, or how much you are successful in certain areas, you still may fail in others. It's true of everybody, and it's something that you have to kind of accept that that's part of life. And no matter how talented, smart, or even spiritual you are, there is going to be some moments and some seasons of failure. That doesn't mean necessarily you failed in the long term. Jesus certainly didn't. Neither did Elijah. But yet in the moment, it may feel that way. The third point that's really, really important is that failure is not a statement about you. Failure is a statement about what happened. So don't say to yourself, that means I can't do it. That means I'm stupid. That means I'm just a loser. It doesn't mean that at all if you fail. It just means you may need to try harder. It may mean you need to learn something new. It may mean that you need to continue to persevere and be faithful. It doesn't mean anything about who you are as a person. And so it's very important that when something goes wrong, or you do something wrong, or you don't succeed at something, that you don't make a statement about you. And the fourth key point is that it's really, really important that if you are going to succeed in getting healthier and stronger and more of the woman that you want to be, you need to learn how to process failure when it happens, because it's going to happen. It's going to happen to you. It happens to all of us. It's happened to me. And so let me just close by giving you 5 action steps that I want you to practice, probably not all at once, but take 1 or 2 when you experience failure, whether it's a little bit or big, and I want you to begin to practice these action steps so that you don't let failure stop you dead in your tracks, nor do you let it get the best of who you are or who God's calling you to be. So the first action step is don't give up. The worst thing that you can do when you fail is to make it a statement about you, I can't do it, and stop persevering or stop working on things. Don't give up. You know, sometimes failure wants to teach us some lessons, and one of the lessons it might want to teach us is just to be faithful to the process. Stay faithful to the process, even if you don't see immediate results. I think of the call that God gave Ezekiel in chapter 2, and he called him to do something that was really hard for him to do, and he actually told him he would not be successful. But he wanted Ezekiel to do it anyway, and I want to read you what he told Ezekiel to do. It's in chapter 2, and he says this, "Son of man, stand up. I want to speak with you." And the Spirit came into me, and he spoke, and he set me on my feet, and I listened carefully to his words. "Son of man," he said, "I'm sending you to the nation of Israel, a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their ancestors have been rebelling against me to this very day. They are a stubborn and hard-hearted people, but I am sending you to them. This is what the sovereign Lord has said. And whether they listen or they refuse to listen, for remember, they're rebels, at least they will know that they have had a prophet among them. Son of man, do not fear their words. Do not be afraid, even though their threats around you sound like nettles and briars and stinging scorpions. Do not be dismayed by their dark scowls, even though they are rebels. You must give them my message, whether they listen or not. But they won't listen, for they are completely rebellious. Son of man, listen to what I say to you." And so perhaps God's calling you to speak up to some destructive people in your life, and they won't listen to you. They don't listen to you, and you sort of feel like a failure, like this isn't working. I've tried everything that Leslie's told me to do, and it's not working. It might be working in you to help you stay faithful to the call that God's given you. It might be working in you to help you have courage and strength to be the healthy person, to step out of that dance, even if the other person doesn't step out. So don't let yourself measure success in what happens only on the outside. Sometimes success is what happens on the inside. And so don't give up, because failure may be teaching you some lessons, and one of them is to stay faithful. Don't give up, because failure may also be teaching you to stay persevering. You know, whoever succeeds on the first try or the second try. One of my favorite books, The Help, was written by Catherine Stockert. She got 60 rejection notices when she submitted her manuscript. Now, as an author, I would have given up, I think, especially if it was my first book, which was hers. But she didn't. She took each rejection notice and she made all the criticism and the critiques that she got on her paper, and she worked on improving her manuscript until it was better and better and better. She persevered. I don't know what her first draft of The Help looked like, but when she got her 61st notice and it was accepted, it was a terrific book and a wonderful movie. And so failure may be teaching you to persevere, that you have something here, but you need to work harder to make it better. Don't let failure stop you. Abraham Lincoln experienced many setbacks and personal and political failures. He lost a lot of elections. He had a lot of personal setbacks. He had a nervous breakdown, and yet he went on. And he became one of the greatest American presidents we ever had. And during the Civil War, he impacted American history in a significant way. Why? Because he didn't let failure become a statement about him. It was something that happened, and he persevered through it and continued to do the work that God had called him to do. So first, don't give up. If you're in the midst of trying some new things and it's not going so well, persevere, be faithful, continue the process, because God has some important lessons for you to learn in that. The second thing that I want you to learn through failure is to take responsibility, because there's sometimes we need lessons to learn through failure on things that we did wrong. Missteps that we took when little Natalia was learning how to walk, part of her learning through her failure was, how did I lose my balance? How do I learn to put one foot in front of the other better? How do I learn not to trip over my own feet? How do I learn all these different things that she has to learn? And so when we're learning new skills, obviously we're going to make mistakes. I began learning some drawing over the Christmas holidays, and I was going to show you my sketchbook, but I decided not to, because there's so many mistakes and there's so many scratch outs and stuff. Because when you're learning new things, of course you're going to make mistakes, and you have to take responsibility for those. Look at what you're doing wrong. Pay attention to what you could be doing better. So many of us don't learn from our mistakes, and we repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again because we don't take responsibility. And sometimes we equate taking responsibility with taking full blame for something, and that's why we avoid taking responsibility. But I'm not talking about that. I'm saying look for what you could have done or what you did do that contributed to the failure. Did you not study hard enough? Did you not practice long enough? Did you get too excited or too emotional? Did you not pay attention? What could you do differently? What is the lesson for you to learn about you in this failure so you can begin to do it differently? That's an important thing, to take responsibility for your part of what happened so that you can learn from it and do it differently next time. The third thing I want you to do is stop beating yourself up. You see, oftentimes we think taking responsibility means that we should just beat ourselves up and call ourselves a loser and we can't do it right and we're just terrible at this and we're so stupid. That's not what I'm talking about. Taking responsibility is looking for what you can change or correct so that you can do it differently next time. Beating yourself up serves no good purpose. It just serves to make you feel bad and keeps you stuck in blame and shame. So stop it. Don't beat yourself up. Instead, take action to do it differently. I think of two characters in the Bible that failed Jesus. One was Judas, and the other was Peter. When Judas realized what he had done, he said, "I'm seized with remorse. I have sinned. I've betrayed innocent blood." And he so went into a tailspin of beating himself up. What did he do? He committed suicide, which is the ultimate beating yourself up, right? Self-destruction. On the other hand, Peter too failed Jesus. He betrayed him 3 times. And yet Peter learned some important lessons through that. He learned that he was not as courageous as he thought he was. Just a few hours earlier, he had told Jesus, "Who, me? I'll never betray you." Of course not, when Jesus warned him that this is what would happen. But Peter learned humility. He learned he wasn't as courageous and as brave as he thought he was. And that humbled him, which enabled him and empowered him to become a great leader of the church. It didn't stop Peter's progression in godliness or good emotional and mental health, but it caused him to press pause and take responsibility for what he had done wrong. So don't give up. Take responsibility. Don't beat yourself up. Remember, fourth thing, is that you have blind spots. All of us do. You know, when my daughter was learning to drive, one of my biggest fears was that she would not realize that an entire car can hide in your mirror or in those 2 strips along the side of your windshield. And that she would need to recognize that she has blind spots as she's driving so that she makes adjustments for those as she's driving. Otherwise, you can make a significant mistake that can cost you your life or someone else's life. In the same way, psychologists say that we have blind spots. The Bible says that our 2 biggest blind spots are our pride and our self-deception. Because in our pride, we don't think that we have any responsibility to take. It's everybody else's fault. In our self-deception, we believe that we already know all the answers and so we don't have anything to learn. And so it's very important that we recognize our blind spots. And one of the biggest blind spots that I see that sometimes women struggle with in relationships, it's a big blind spot for everybody, but it's the "I'm the lone exception to this rule" blind spot. I remember when my mother was diagnosed with cancer, she was 68 years old and she had smoked for at least 52 years. And she was shocked, like, "I can't believe I got lung cancer." Who, me? Like, after smoking for 52 years, what makes you think you're going to be the lone exception to the rule of getting lung cancer here? But yet people drink and drive and they don't think they're going to get caught. They act reckless and text when they're driving, but they're not the one who's going to get in an accident because they're the exception to the rule. And sometimes we as women think that we can love someone into healing, that somehow they've been divorced 4 times, but we're the one who's going to really love them enough to help them to be stable or help them to be transformed. We're the one who's going to really be able to rescue them from the mess that they've made out of their life. And it's kind of that same self-deception. It's a blind spot that we have. And so be careful of your blind spots. Be aware of them so that you don't make some mistakes in relationships and get yourself into a destructive relationship that you really can't fix the other person. And last but not least, it's really important if you're going to conquer failure is that you ask for help when you need it. We all need help. Nobody gets through this life, gets to a grown-up all by themselves. And even when you're a grown-up, there's plenty of times that grown-ups ask other grown-ups for help because we aren't meant to do this walk all by ourselves. Proverbs 19:20 says this, "Get all the advice and instruction you can so that you will be wise for the rest of your life." All great leaders have helpers alongside of them. Right-hand men, left-hand women, people who come alongside them and mentor them, encourage them, instruct them, guide them, support them, pray for them, pick them up when they fall down, cheerlead them when they get discouraged. We all need people alongside of us. That's what Conquer is for, to have people alongside of you to help you in your journey to become emotionally and spiritually stronger and whole, to become the person that God's called you to be. So don't be afraid or ashamed to ask for help. When I fail at certain things, I often call a friend and say, "Hey, I'm trying to write this chapter in a book and I'm not getting it right, or my editor says it doesn't make sense. Can you give me some tips? Can you read it over and tell me what you think?" Ask for help. It's no black mark on you to say that you don't know everything and that you can't do everything all by yourself. That's a good quality. It's called humility. And when we ask for help, we often get far more than we thought we would get. And so stop yourself from feeling like you have to do it all yourself. And when you're failing at something, just ask for help. Do you think the Apostle Paul could have done everything he did without Barnabas, the encourager beside him, without Timothy and Titus, who also helped him? I don't think so. God has a lot of passages about one anothering. And so when you're stuck and you need help, ask for it. It's there available for you in all different venues. And so don't be afraid to learn the lessons from failure by not giving up, taking responsibility, stop beating yourself up, recognize that you have blind spots and be aware of them, and ask for help. And if you do these 5 things, you will conquer failure. Until next time.